So a very, very strong turnout. One of the things that I found interesting was to ask people about the candidate, who may win, Peter Magyar of the opposition TISA party. I think that outside of Hungary, people hear opposition, they assume that this is going to be a liberal and progressive leader. And when I've spoken to progressive activists here, they've really wanted to caution about the expectations for what a TISA victory may bring. Peter Magyar comes from the Conservative Party. He was within the Fidesz world, and he broke rank, and he in fact disclosed scandals. And then he really began to call out corruption and became the candidate for rule of law. But one of the reasons that he's really gotten the support he has is two things. One, he really has kind of advocated for a corruption and anti-corruption platform and stressed that transparency, accountability, etc. But he really has not, in many ways, taken on the culture issues. So when I spoke with LGBTQ activists, feminists, people who are advocating for the rights of the Roma, which are one of the ethnic minorities here, the issues around refugees, they really stress that this is not necessarily going to be the kind of progressive agenda that maybe we would assume in the United States or in other countries. They say, Hungary is largely conservative and it's a very Catholic country. But Hungarians themselves have also backed a kind of not necessarily religious in their politics, but have supported pluralism. In any case, it's basically to say that Magyar, for example, never really came out in support of gay marriage. That the positions on reproductive health and abortion, are not necessarily going to be this kind of automatic reversal of some of the most egregious laws that Orban put into place. There is really an expectation that, if anything, TISA could, on some very important laws, maybe reverse the worst of what Orban did. And that includes, for example, criminalization of trans people. But it's going to be a steady fight. And the real issue is how much of a victory? How much of a victory will, if TISA wins, how much of a victory will they have? If they win by a 2/3 majority, then they can really move forward with this mandate that they have to bring real change to Hungary. But if it's a closer vote, there's two things. One, if it's a simple vote, for example, it might be that another third party, which is another far right party, might have a coalition that would then give actually Fidesz and Orban more power to kind of disrupt and block real change in Hungary. The other thing is that it could be that if a simple vote, that it just won't just mean that too many of the Fidesz politicians will remain in the Congress. And again, the judiciary here there's a lot of people that Orban put into place. So what you have is a situation that maybe TISA wins, but it's still going to be a real battle. And they worry, and of course, that if TISA can't deliver on some really significant mandates, then that kind of sets up the possibility for the right to say, "Look, there's not enough change happening, and in the future, the elections will then once again go possibly to more far right candidates." So there's a lot of pressure. I think one of the things that's been interesting is possibly to me one of the most significant pieces of all this is really a vote today for Hungary to rejoin and be a part of the European Union. And in fact, if it does, if TISA wins, Magyar supports the being, closer to the European Union. What that will mean is that Hungary will, in many cases, have policies and laws that reflect European Union norms and standards, which may be more liberal. So with regard to, for example, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, rights of refugees, etc. Well, refugees questionable actually, but but certainly women's rights and LGBTQ rights. It could be that by becoming closer to the European Union, by readopting these policies, Hungary could in fact advance more liberal policies and give more rights to those communities. So that's kind of one way that we may see an advance, even if there's a center right politician, and even if they're not directly advocating for those rights and policies. So I think that what people are seeing who step back and look at this, progressives are saying, let's be strategic. Let's think about this in terms of the longer term. What we have to do right now is we have to win this election, We have to make sure that a lot of people are on the ground locally who represent a rule of law. We have to basically reverse some of the worst things Orban did, and we have to prosecute. We have to go after the crimes of the Orban regime and pick at least a few significant uh, scandals or crimes that are known, but that didn't get prosecuted, that got blocked under Orban, and go ahead and pursue justice for those. Um, and in all of that, I've been speaking also to judges and lawyers here to talk about what is the possibility of restoring rule of law to Hungary. And one thing they say is that this is the time, with this vote and going forward for the next year, for Hungarians to engage in a process of civic education, of civic engagement. And in doing that, work to essentially write or rewrite a new constitution. If that can happen, they believe that they can put in place the basis for a true and more participatory democracy and a better functioning constitution and a system of justice that really has what they're hoping for, which is transparency, accountability, and delivers justice. So that's the picture here. And you probably heard the bells ringing. It's 7 o'clock. It's past 7 o'clock. So the polls are closed, and I think we'll be a couple of hours before we really see what's happening here. But I think that from what I can judge, there's a great hope. There's across town. Fidesz is holding its own watch party. So there's a lot of good things that are happening here in Budapest, as well as, of course, other cities around Hungary. But I think the mood is that this is a moment of potentially great change, and people are very hopeful, despite being very anxious.